Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. The Silent Watcher. Jake had been hiking in the remote woods of New Mexico for years. The towering trees, the silence of the wilderness, and the crisp air. It all felt like home to him. He loved being alone in nature, far from the noise and distractions of everyday life. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned a dark shade of purple, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was another hiker, maybe someone else looking for a spot to camp. The figure stood in the distance, perfectly still, just beyond the line of trees. Its shape was odd, too tall, its limbs too long. Jake couldn't make out the details at first, but something felt off. It was the way it stood, motionless, as if it wasn't just waiting, but watching, trying to shake the unease crawling up his spine. Jake continued walking, figuring the figure was just another camper. But as he got closer, his stomach twisted in dread. The figure's proportions seemed wrong. Its arms were too long, stretching at strange angles, its posture unnatural. Jake stopped dead in his tracks, heart hammering. He blinked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He forced himself to take a step forward, trying to convince himself it was just a trick of the light. But when he turned to look back, the figure was gone. A shiver ran down Jake's back, and he quickened his pace, his footsteps now echoing through the trees as he made his way to his campsite. He could still feel the eyes of whatever it was burning into his skin, even though it was no longer there. That night, after setting up his tent, Jake tried to shake off the strange encounter. He told himself it was just his imagination. The woods played tricks on you, especially as darkness settled in. But as the hours passed, the silence of the night began to feel heavier, almost suffocating. Jake lay in his sleeping bag, listening to the wind rustling the leaves outside, when he heard it. A scraping sound. At first, it was faint, almost like a twig brushing against the tent. But then it came again, louder this time. It was slow, deliberate, like claws dragging across the fabric. Jake's heart stopped. He held his breath, hoping the sound would fade, but it didn't. It continued, scraping against the tent, growing louder with every passing second. He squeezed his eyes shut, telling himself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon or a fox. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The noise was too deliberate, too eerie. It wasn't the sound of a small creature. This was something much bigger. The scraping grew closer, and then a whisper, a low, guttural sound that made Jake's skin crawl. He opened his eyes just enough to see the dim glow of his lantern flickering in the corner of the tent. And then, through the thin fabric, he saw it. The figure. It wasn't standing anymore. It was crouching, its twisted face pressed against the side of the tent. Jake froze, unable to move. The thing's face was distorted, its eyes too wide, its mouth stretched into a twisted grin. Its skin was pale, almost lifeless, and its gaze was locked on him, unwavering. The lantern flickered once more, casting the figure's shadow across the inside of the tent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, louder than the wind, louder than the scraping. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body wouldn't obey him. The thing's face twisted again, its smile stretching unnaturally wide, and Jake felt the cold weight of terror settle in his chest. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the scraping stopped. Jake lay there, eyes wide, waiting for the next sound, the next movement. But nothing came. The figure had vanished. He didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. He kept his lantern on, staring into the darkness, hoping it would stay away. But the next morning, when Jake packed up to leave, he found something chilling. A deep scratch, almost like claw marks, etched into the side of his tent. It was a warning, and the watcher was still out there, waiting. Story 2. The Shapeshifter in the Night. Rachel had always dreamed of a peaceful life, away from the noise and chaos of the city. So when she finally found a small ranch in the middle of the Arizona desert, she jumped at the opportunity. The place was isolated, tucked deep into the quiet hills. It was exactly what she'd wanted. After a long day of unpacking, Rachel felt exhausted but satisfied. She took a moment to admire the view through the window of her new home, the sun setting behind the jagged mountains. But as night fell and the darkness wrapped around the ranch, something strange caught her attention. She heard it, a low, growling noise coming from the barn. It wasn't the kind of sound you'd expect from any animal she knew. It was deep, guttural, and seemed to vibrate through the ground. Rachel froze. Was it a mountain lion? A coyote? She didn't know, but she was curious. Grabbing a flashlight, Rachel headed toward the barn, the eerie sound growing louder with every step. The beam of her flashlight bounced off the dirt path as she walked, her footsteps echoing in the quiet night. Her heart beat faster, but she pushed the fear aside. It was probably just an animal looking for food, nothing more. When she reached the barn, she hesitated, her hand gripping the cold doorknob. The growling stopped, but the air felt thick, as if something was watching her. She took a deep breath and opened the door. The beam of her flashlight swept across the dark interior, and then she saw it, a figure, tall, standing perfectly still at the far end of the barn. At first it looked like a man, but then Rachel saw the eyes. They were glowing red, like two fiery embers in the darkness. Her breath caught in her throat. Before she could even think, the figure moved. It darted toward the shadows with unnatural speed, faster than any human should be able to move. The light flickered, and when it steadied, the figure was gone. Rachel stood frozen, her mind racing. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She slowly backed away from the barn, never taking her eyes off the darkness. She didn't stop until she was safely inside the house, locking the door behind her. But the fear didn't go away. That night, the sound started again. At first, it was just the growling. Then, there were strange noises around the house. Scratching, tapping, footsteps that didn't belong to anything human. Rachel couldn't explain what she had seen in the barn. She had heard the local legends, of course. Skinwalkers. Shape-shifting creatures that could take on the form of anything. They were said to be ghosts of people who had crossed the line between the living and the dead. But she had never believed in those kinds of stories. Not until now. Every night, the sounds grew closer. And every night, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her. It was waiting. In the back of her mind, she knew something terrible had found its way to her ranch. And it was just getting started. Story 3. The Infected Family. David had heard the rumors, the old stories about skinwalkers lurking in the hills, but he'd always shrugged them off. It was just superstition, he told himself. A man had to be practical, especially when he was trying to enjoy a weekend getaway with his family. His wife, Sarah, and their young daughter, Emily, had rented a small cabin in the woods, far away from the noise and chaos of their everyday lives. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape, but that peace was shattered on the second night. It started with Emily. She came running into their room, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Daddy, there's a man outside," she said in a shaky voice. "I saw him standing by the trees." David sat up, brushing his hand through his hair, trying to shake off the fog of sleep. "It's just the dark, honey," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "There's no one out there." But Emily was insistent. "No, Daddy." He was looking at me. He had big eyes and a really wide face. David couldn't understand. He figured it was just a nightmare, a child's imagination running wild. He got up, walked to the window, and looked out into the thick darkness. There was nothing, just the wind rustling through the trees. He gave Emily a quick hug, told her it was probably just a trick of the light, and she reluctantly went back to bed. But the unease lingered. The next morning, Emily's description of the man stuck with David. She talked about his eyes, too large, almost glowing, like they didn't belong to a person. His face was wide, stretched in a way that made David's stomach twist with discomfort. Something about the way she spoke about it, like she couldn't quite remember it, but still felt it, sent a chill down his spine. David told himself it was just a bad dream, but deep down, he wasn't sure. And that night, his doubts turned into terror. He was awoken by a growl, a deep, throaty sound that wasn't coming from any animal he knew. It was closer than the night before, and far more menacing. His heart pounded as he slowly pushed himself out of bed and grabbed his flashlight. He moved cautiously through the dark house, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the silence. When he reached the back door, he stopped dead in his tracks. The family dog Max was snarling, pacing back and forth, her fur bristling. David could see the whites of her eyes in the dim light, her body tense like she was ready to spring. He looked outside through the small window next to the door. Faintly in the distance, he saw it, a figure, tall, impossibly tall, standing motionless by the trees. Its limbs were too long, stretching in ways that didn't make sense. The way it moved, fluid, almost unnatural, made David's breath catch in his throat. It was too far to make out details, but something about it felt wrong. The skin on the back of his neck prickled, his instinct screaming that whatever it wasn't human. Max let out a bark, but the figure didn't move. Instead, it tilted its head in a way that made David's stomach churn. The creature seemed to be studying him, as if it already knew everything about him, about his family, even though they'd only arrived here a few days ago. His mind raced, flashes of the old stories about skinwalkers, about creatures that could mimic humans, take on their shape, their very essence. He'd laughed them off before. Now, he wasn't so sure. David backed away from the window, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned to call out to Sarah and Emily, but before he could say a word, a loud thud echoed from outside, like something heavy had dropped to the ground. Then the growl came again, closer, louder. It was circling them now. The creature had been watching them the whole time, waiting, and David realized, with growing horror, that it had never left. It wasn't just a man. It was something far worse, something that could wear a human face, a thing that only looked human, and it was coming for them. David quickly grabbed Emily and Sarah, rushing them to the farthest room of the cabin. But he knew it was only a matter of time before the creature found a way inside. It always did. The thing in the woods had already marked them, and there was no escaping what came next.